Basically, what I was asked to do today was to talk about what's the pest outlook for the coming year on these three particular crops that the Sustainable Farming System is working with. So I will talk a little bit about that, but before I do, I just want to follow up with what was mentioned about our decision support tool that you may have picked up. That's these three here. We have them for almonds, cotton, citrus, alfalfa. And it's a way that we mind all of our pest management guidelines. It's a way that everything comes together in a real nice sheet in 3 pages. And while she mentioned the pesticide part of it, one of the pitches I've been making a lot around integrated pest management, because I think we're ready for a renaissance with IPM at a number of levels within society. I use the IPM toolbox as my analogy for integrated pest management. We all kind of think about that and go, yeah, I hear about I can think about a toolbox, and I open it up and I have a number of tools available for a number of different jobs. And so you like to have a toolbox that is general enough, but you also want it to be robust enough to where you can have the right tool for the right job. Well, one of those trays in that toolbox are the pesticides. And so we need to have a good, robust set of insecticides, fungicides, herbicides for the job we need to do. So, but we have to remember, when we take that particular tray out, the remainder of the stuff in that box, biological control, cultural control, all the things that we do for long-term management, so hopefully we don't need that first tray, is in the rest of that box. The tray that contains the pesticides, while we've had a really good set of chemicals that become available that are more selective, safer, environmentally friendlier, those are all developed at great expense with private investment. So the crop protection industry is where those are coming from at, again, great investment expense, and it's great to have it. The rest of the box are information about biology, our information about how to manage culturally, our information, all the things culturally we do, you do, and we try to work together to come up with the best sets of practices. That's all funded through public research. And so that box is those tools are getting old, they're getting lost, and they're getting worn. And so I make a pitch at all times. We talk about the toolbox, we're talking about the whole thing, and that toolbox is really dependent upon public research funding, which has been far and few between in the last couple of decades. And that's why I hope we're moving toward a renaissance that we can fund our reinvestment back into UCIPM's decision tools and other research. Again, those other tools are based upon the research components. And about 10 years ago, we lost in California our independent competitive IPM research grants. So just an FYI as we talk about some of these things, because what we're talking about today really requires a lot of folks going out and thinking about it and doing some research in terms of trying to understand what pests are there and what their life cycle looks like. Marcia, I'm also going to rely on you to sort of tell me when's enough's enough, because I don't have slides that are going to direct me.
Okay.
Again, I'm looking for an interactive exchange today, and I know many of you in the room, we've worked together for over 30 years, many of us, on the same pest that we have out here on this sheet. So I just want to talk a little about, the question I have is, what is the effect of a winter like this on our key pests in alfalfa, cotton, and almonds? And so I sat down very briefly and thought about it, listed out some of the key pests, and think to myself, what's the impact of rain? Is it positive or negative? What's the impact of a warm or cold winter? Is it positive or negative? And what are some of the other collateral things that occur when we have a season like we have? So just start with alfalfa for an example. Where you see a plus, that means it's positive for us. It's bad for the bug, it's good for us. And a negative is it's in favor of the bug. And I'm not going to talk about probably what you're really interested in right now in almonds, and that's bloom spray fungicides, because 2 reasons. One, I know nothing about them, and would only lead somebody astray. And second, I think you need a full conversation on that from our plant pathology specialist. And I talked to Fleur, and he was
Right, and we are planning a meeting March 29th
Okay.
for almonds.
Okay. Yeah, Flora really wanted to be here, but unfortunately, he had an appointment with immigration to get his green card, so he's very eager to make sure he has his green card renewed. So, as a citizen of France. So what I'm going to be going through here very, very quickly and seeing where the conversation wants to go is looking at some of these pests. For example, weevils it's been wet out there. I know it's been very wet. Are we seeing the weevil larvae out there in the alfalfa? Is anybody checking? Can anybody get to the field without drowning?
They're out.
They're out there. Good.
I have a few fields that are in the 20s already.
Okay.
Almost balanced.
So some fields with 20 counts of weevils in them. Is that for this time of year about normal, average?
Sometimes you come this early, but usually it's closer to the 1st of March for us over there, I think. But I've had years as I've been writing recs as early as the 15. Looking forward, you don't really get to the danger point before you write the rec. Because all the applications are all backed up now, so you kind of have to get things lined up as soon as you can because you don't know when the airplane or helicopter is going to get there these days. They're backed up on account of the almond price.
Yeah. So weevil's a little earlier, meaning it's probably to me it wasn't an exceptionally warm winter, but it wasn't a very cold winter either. So you think it's primarily just because it's been a fairly warm January, February that brought them out a little bit sooner?
Yeah, likely. And it's pretty variable between fields, depending on the amount of cover and whatnot. I think my highest counts are where there's 1 to 4 stands. There's a lot of bare soil.
Yeah, so rain to me could be a positive on our side because it's a negative because we can't get in there and treat, but it could be a positive from the standpoint for the stuff that came in over winter that have been either in the duff on the ground with very flooded conditions and or just wet conditions. I mean, it's certainly not conducive to,
I've never noticed that the rain has
any effect on weevils. Okay. And of course, warmer temperatures is going to give you,
You can have a freeze, and then
Right.
freeze after they're active, then that can delay treatment.
Right.
We don't want to freeze now.
Well, no, and the thing about it is when we talk about freezing insects, it's usually when you hear the citrus people really complain about the 28 degrees for more than 7 or 8 hours. That's the kind of freeze that really impacts the insect populations. Otherwise, they can withstand quite a bit. But it's when you start to get into that stuff that begins to affect the crops in the early to midwinter is where I think a lot of that benefit comes in reducing some of the populations. I will say, and correct me if you've seen anything else, but I see where we have either foggy conditions, which means we've had rainfall fairly early, or at least in December. So you have foggy conditions, wet conditions, high humidity. That's where I see the blue alfalfa aphid and some of the other aphids populations are down. The reason for that is that it's warm and moist, humid, and that's what fungi like, which is we all know why we're spraying these trees like crazy. But it's also what the insect pathogens like, the fungi that go into the insect, particularly the soft-bodied insects. So I think we're a little better off there than when we go through a very dry winter like we've had. Armyworm. I mean, we're going to see an increased habitat this year, all the weeds. So we're going to see probably more hosts out there for armyworms and other worms. One of the ones that comes to my mind is if the deserts really bloom or the dry areas really bloom or turn green. I've seen years where we've had painted ladies come through, that kind of colorful little butterfly come through in the millions and millions coming off the desert areas and coming into the field. I doubt they're much of a problem, but it's one of those things that I've seen where you have a lot of growth, a lot of material to be feeding on out there, and then they begin to fly. I think some of our worm pests could be in that category in the future, due to increased habitat. Any other observations on what we're seeing at the aphid situation thus far in alfalfa? Very little, if anything. We mentioned that the weevil seemed to be about normal. That's good, and no major outbreaks. Curious about cotton. Anybody here putting in new cotton or adding to the acreage? Don't be embarrassed. There's one back there. Yay! I'm hearing it's going to be, in fact, I got a call from CAPCA for their March meeting saying we've got a request for a cotton pest management talk. So that's the first request in 10 years I've had. And I'm guessing it's because of the amount of seed that's being sold as well as the request to the warehouses for particular products. They figured they better get people back out there, remember which pests are which. Looking at ligas, with the amount of rainfall we've had, therefore the amount of green material out there, we're probably going to see some widespread outbreaks of ligas. I have no doubt about that. You're better off if you're near an alfalfa area like this, where you have a lot of alfalfa fields to draw a lot of the ligas in, rather than just having weeds, safflower, and cotton. The kicker there will be whatever the bridging crops are, or the bridging weeds are, including London rocket, short-potted mustard, these kinds of weeds. If they continue on to May and June and then dry up, you're going to see an extra generation of ligas kicked out and be moving in at that particular period. So now's the time to sort of begin to, between now, really the end of March is when I really start looking for them. As you go by fields that have lots of weeds in them, just kind of take a net out there and look for them, because this could be a really bad year for them. Mites, I don't know. They overwinter in the soil. I think if it's moist and saturated soils, it's to our advantage. Again, aphid, I think the same sort of a thing, depending upon how the epizootics or epidemics went through. Whitefly's an unknown. I find that as we have drought, whitefly tends to increase in terms of its distribution. We've fought it now in cotton for almost 5 years or more, maybe 6. There's going to be a meeting that California cotton growers are putting on in March as well to talk specifically about whitefly and sticky cotton. It's still a problem. Even though it wasn't a very widespread situation last year, there's still some complaints coming out about sticky cotton, which is something we can't put up with. But again, it's got to get really cold to sort of freeze some of these overwintering insects out. Now I'm going to go to almonds, which I know least about, but I see more experience in the room. So I've been talking to my colleagues about leaf-footed bug. Is this weather we've had good or, to our advantage or their advantage? And the answer is we don't know. It's been, because of the way they overwinter, they don't, they don't really, not really on the ground. They do aggregations. Yes, freezing temperatures can help, but that's really freezing temperatures where you're below 28 for a number of hours that affect the citrus as well. So I don't think this weather pattern will change much of what you've seen in the past. It's kind of probably what you're near. Some pomegranates. Aggregations, if folks seen the aggregations in the last little bit, I've heard they're out there. Just this large leaf-footed bug aggregations that get together before they start moving into some of the other fields. So they're still out there for sure. Navel orangeworm. I think the fact that we've had wet, moist conditions all since November on the ground, so I think your overwintering nuts that might be still in the field probably are saturated or probably not as good a material, probably overall reducing those overwintering populations. So maybe that's a little bit of a plus. If you had a lot of them laying on the ground or mummies in the trees, it's not a very nice environment for them. Anybody got anything counter to that or supportive of that? Experience from other wet years? Most of our experience has been dry winters for the last little bit. I think a lot of folks have forgotten some of those things. I looked up San Jose scale, impacts perhaps on some of the winter dormant oils could be against us. And the temperature really is only affecting the mated females that are overwintering. The unmated females or the black caps aren't really affected much by temperature. Again, mites, it's not hurting that the soils are saturated or at least wet in terms of their survival. Again, I don't have any data that says one way or the other. I'm just sort of trying to draw some conclusions on if you're in the soil and you're completely surrounded with water in cold temperatures for months on end, it certainly couldn't do you much good. And then, anyone have any counter arguments on that? So the meeting's going to go fast if you, which is, I guess, a good thing. Peach twig borer. Anything that with the hibernaculum sitting there in the trees, again, complete moisture, wet, soaked all winter long. I can't see that as an advantage. So whether it makes a big impact or not, don't know. But I don't see it as an advantage for them. So it's a point to us.
We're losing bells for peach tree borer. Is there any other recommended materials?
Not an expert in that area at all, but certainly one of its, a very similar product, Altacor, Coragen. We have Coragen in the field crops. I think it's Altacor and very, very similar. It's the same mode of action, just a slightly different product. So that would be one immediate replacement. Comments by anybody on belt?
On Alfalfa, I had a grower that used it repeatedly and it developed pesticide resistance pretty fast.
You hear that multiple back-to-back uses, it tends to, at least one experience is, it tends to get tolerant to it. So the rule of thumb, the good rule of thumb, the golden rule really is make sure you rotate among active ingredients. Don't use the same one back-to-back on the same generations in particular.
Well, it's difficult when they say, it's so cheap. It's like, well, it's not that cheap.
Pesticide resistance is not cheap.
Yeah.
Getting to it is cheap, but dealing with it is not expensive. So, other comments on almonds? Marcia?
Comments on almonds?
No. Would you like any other? That's basically what I had, was to try and go through and just say what we think is going to happen. And my crystal ball is a bit fuzzy, and so I was just trying to pull things together in terms of what a wet year would do to some of these pests. And since there's about, I don't know, a couple of centuries worth of experience in this room, if you have anything to add, please do. This is one of the advantages of this particular organization. It's usually small enough to where we can get these kinds of discussions going and learn from each other. So, if not, then I'm going to turn it back to Marcia and go to your next speaker.
Okay, no other questions for Pete? No.
I'm around for the rest of the meeting too. You can catch me aside if you like. Okay, thank you.